Today's story is titled, I Saw Something Wearing a Man's Face on the Subway, and It Knows I Saw It, by Brotato Chip 411. The link to the story is in the description below. Please enjoy. I never bought into the tinfoil hat shit taxonomy. Demons, shapeshifters, reptilians, the shadow government horror show kids whisper about on late-night Discord servers while eating cold Hot Pockets. It all smelled like the same brand of loser desperation to me. Boars looking for a secret door in a world made of concrete and debt. I'm 25. I live in a fourth-floor Queens walk-up that smells perpetually of boiled cabbage and damp drywall. I work the register at a midtown bodega where the air conditioning has been dying a slow, noisy death since June, and my degree, a nice framed piece of paper that cost 40 grand, is currently acting as a coaster for a stack of unpaid parking tickets. It was 2 weeks ago, Tuesday morning, 6:12 a.m. The kind of wet, bruised August dusk that passes for dawn in the city. I was running on 3 hours of fitful sleep and a lukewarm paper cup of 7-Eleven sludge that tasted like scorched pennies. The subway car was mostly dead quiet, holding the usual collection of early shift zombies, a nurse in faded scrubs, a guy asleep against the pole with his mouth opened, and a tired woman reading a dog-eared paperback. Then, he stepped on at 34th Street. He didn't belong in that car. He wore a gray suit that looked like it had been spun out of old money, wingtip shoes polished to a mere shine, and carried an expensive leather briefcase. At first glance, he was just another Wall Street shark running on espresso and self-importance. Then he turned his head towards the fluorescent lights, and the spit dried in my throat. His face was wrong. Not ugly, not deformed, wrong. It looked like an artist had drawn a human face based entirely through a telephone description. The skin was too smooth. No pores, no stubble, no tiny veins near the temples. A shade of waxy peach that didn't belong to a living organism. His eyes were perfectly round, like glass marble shoved into dough, and his ears sat just a quarter-inch too low on his skull, tapering off into subtle, unnatural points. His lips were moving, but he was not speaking, just flexing, tightening, stretching into tiny, unnatural shapes, like a man practicing how to smile in front of a mirror. Then he blinked. It wasn't a normal eyelid flutter. His whole face reset. It was like he was having a micro-seizure. His eyes, nose, cheekbones, and mouth all glitching within a fraction of a second. Shuddering like a bad CRT television receiving a static spike. A momentary frame drop. When the hitch passed, the face snapped back into place with a subtle, wet pop that I felt in my molars rather than heard. I stared. I couldn't help it. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. He must have felt the weight of my eyes because he turned slowly, his marble gaze locking onto mine. And for a split second, the waxy peach mask sagged. The corners of his mouth stretched wide, far too wide, revealing a double row of small, translucent, pegged teeth that looked more like fishbone than human enamel. I squeezed my eyes shut, counted to 3, and opened them. He was just a guy. A tired, middle-aged executive in a charcoal suit checking his Apple Watch. A micro-dream, I told myself, my hands trembling as I gripped the grimy steel handrail. Just sleep deprivation. Hallucination brought to you by caffeine sludge and panic. When the train screeched into my stop, I practically bolted through the doors, but as the cars began to pull away into the dark tunnel, I made the mistake of glancing at the train window. Through the dirty glass, the man in the suit was standing right at the door. He was looking at me. And in the reflection, the suit was gone. His head was long, gray, and hairless, skin pulled taut over an elongated skull that looked like dried parchment. His grin filled half his head, and he raised 2 fingers in a quiet, polite little wave. You don't go crazy all at once. It's a slow leak. For 3 days, I tried to drown it in cheap beer and extra shifts. But once you notice the seam in the yellow wallpaper, your eyes wander back to it every single time. By Friday, I was seeing it everywhere. It started small. A barista at Starbucks whose left eye dropped 2 inches down her cheek for half a second before snapping back while she handed me my change. A guy walking a golden retriever on Broadway whose neck bent at a sickening 90-degree angle when he sneezed, a loud, dry crack like a dry branch snapping, only for him to keep walking without even touching his collar. They were everywhere, in the background of new broadcasts, sitting on bench seats in the park, driving cabs. But the dam broke on a slow Tuesday afternoon. The bodega was dead. The hum of the refrigeration units was the only sound in the store, droning on like a choir of cicadas. I was sitting on a squeaky stool behind the counter, staring at my fingernails, trying to talk myself out of calling a hotline.
"Excuse me, mister?"
The voice was tiny, high-pitched, clear as a bell. I looked down over the counter. A little girl was standing there, 7, maybe 8 years old. Bright yellow raincoat, pink sneakers, brown pigtails tied with cheap plastic baubles. She was holding a 4-pack of AA batteries.
"Just these, please,"
she said. I reached out to take the batteries. My thumb brushed her tiny fingers. Her skin was ice cold, like meat pulled straight from the freezer. She smiled up at me, and then the mask tore open. Her cheeks split. The tear started at the corners of her mouth and zipped upward towards her ears with the sound of wet Velcro pulling apart. Her jaw dropped down, her chin touching her collarbone, revealing a throat lined with dark, wet cilia that vibrated in the air. Her eyes didn't roll back. The brown irises simply dissolved, swallowed by a thick, syrupy black ink that welled up from inside her skull and spilled over her bottom eyelids like grease.
"Is this enough, mister?"
Her voice came again, but it didn't come from her mouth. It came from inside my own head, rattling behind my forehead like a pebble in a tin can. I screamed. I didn't mean to, but a terrible animal noise tore out of my throat. I scrambled backward, knocking over my stool, slamming hard into the cigarette display case. Packs of Marlboros and Newport fell around me like hail. My boss came running out of the back room, yelling my name, but his voice sounded muffled, like he was yelling from the bottom of a swimming pool. I didn't grab my coat. I didn't grab my wallet or my phone. I shoved past him, threw the glass front door open so hard the brass bell shattered, and ran out into the blinding August light. Every face on the sidewalk was wrong. A woman pushing a stroller looked at me, her nose sliding off her face like warm lard. A teenager on a city bike turned his head toward me, a full 360 degrees, his vertebrae popping like bubble wrap, and smiled with a mouthful of black needles. I ran. I ran until my lungs burned with the taste of exhaust and copper, my sneakers slapping the hot asphalt, straight back to my apartment building. I took the stairs 3 at a time, my keys jangling wildly in my hands. I unlocked the deadbolt, threw the door open, slammed it shut behind me, and threw the heavy brass latch. I leaned against the wood, gasping for air, tears stinging my face.
Sweetheart?
The voice came from the living room. I froze. My breath hitched in my chest. I stepped slowly around the narrow hallway corner. Sitting on my saggy sideway treasure couch were my parents. My parents lived in upstate New York, a 4-hour drive on a good day. They don't have a key to my place. They never visit without calling 3 weeks in advance to complain about city traffic and parking fees. Yet, there they were, sitting side by side on the worn corduroy cushions.
Look at you.
My mother said softly. She was wearing her favorite blue cardigan, her hands folded neatly in her lap.
You're soaking wet with sweat. You haven't answered your phone in days, honey.
Your manager called us. My father chimed in. He was wearing his faded Mets hat, his arms crossed over his chest. He said you had some kind of episode at the store. Ran off. Their voices were perfect, the warm, familiar timbres of my childhood, but neither of them were breathing. Their chests were completely still, no rise, no fall, and their posture was rigid, like 2 museum mannequins dressed in my parents' laundry. Their smiles were stretched just half an inch too wide, so taut that their skin around their cheekbones looked pale and bloodless. What are you doing here? I choked out, backing towards the kitchen counter, my fingers reaching blindly for a butcher knife. We came to help, my dad said. He stood up. The motion was unnaturally fluid. No shifting of weight, no creaking knees, just an upright elevation of his torso. We were worried about you. You've got the sickness. The what?
Demon face syndrome,
my mother said, her voice dropping into a sing-song, clinical cadence, like a daytime TV host explaining a new detergent.
It's all over the news, darling. A visual epidemic. The brain stops filtering the noise. You start seeing the seams.
My stomach dropped into a cold, bottomless pit. I never told you what I was seeing, I whispered. My voice cracked. I didn't tell my boss. I didn't tell anyone. My mother tilted her head to the left. Snap. It was a dry, wooden crack, the sound of an old floorboard giving way. Her head flopped over at a 45-degree angle, resting nearly on her shoulder, but her wide, unblinking eyes stayed locked on mine.
We know, sweetheart,
she said. Her mouth didn't move in sync with the words anymore. The audio was out of alignment.
We know because we love you, and because you need your medication.
My father took a step towards me. His right leg didn't bend at the knee. You're not real, I sobbed, my hands finally wrapping around the handle of the knife. Get the fuck out of my apartment! You're not my dad! My father stopped. He looked at my mother. Then, together, in perfect, terrifying synchronization, they both tilted their heads further to the side, a jagged, mechanical twitch.
We just want to fix your eyes,
my mother whispered. And then, the corners of her mouth split all the way to her jawline. I don't remember the ride. I remember the hallway. Long, windowless, smelling intensely of bleach and cold ozone. There were no badges, no government seals on the doors, no men in black and sunglasses. Just men in sterile, pale blue scrubs with quiet voices and heavy hands. They didn't hit me. They didn't tie me down. They just held my arms with a crushing hydraulic strength and let me down into a concrete basement where the fluorescent lights hummed at a high, singing frequency that made my teeth ache. They put me in a room with about 30 other people. It was a windowless waiting room lined with folding metal chairs. The people sitting in them looked like ghosts, pale, sunken-eyed, staring at their shoes, shivering despite the heavy heat in the room. Mounted in the upper corners of the ceiling were 4 flat-screen TVs. They were playing a taped broadcast on an endless 3-minute loop. A female news anchor in a sharp red blazer sat behind a desk. Her voice was soothing, warm, and utterly fake.
If you or a loved one are experiencing acute visual distortions, do not panic. Prosopope metamorphopsia, commonly referred to as demon face syndrome, is a temporary neurological misalignment affecting the brain's fusiform face area. It is not contagious. It is simply a failure of the internal filter to process facial geometry correctly. You are not seeing monsters. You are seeing a glitch in your own neural hardware. Treatment is available. Clinical stabilization is guaranteed. You can have your normal life back.
The line repeated. You can have your normal life back. On the third loop, a guy sitting 2 rows ahead of me stood up. He was thin, wearing a torn denim jacket, his face covered in red, angry scratch marks where he had tried to claw his own eyes out.
Liars!
He roared at the screen, spit flying from his lips.
You know the veil is slipped! We saw what's behind it!
2 men in blue scrubs stepped through the heavy steel door at the back of the room. They didn't run. They just walked up to him, grabbed his shoulders, and dragged him backward out of the room. The guy screamed the whole way out, but as soon as his heels crossed the threshold into the hallway, the sound vanished, completely cut off, like someone had hit a mute button on the universe. Nobody else in the room moved. Nobody made a sound. We just sat there, watching the anchor on the TV screen, and as I watched her, as her soothing voice explained away my madness, she turned her head slightly to read the teleprompter. For half a second, her face didn't follow her skull. The skin lagged behind, dragging like wet latex, revealing a gray, jawless void beneath, before snapping back into place with a quiet, digitalized flicker. She didn't miss a beat. She just kept reading. They kept us for 3 days. They ran brain scans. They stuck long needles into the base of my skull to draw spinal fluid. They made us stare at the flashing lights on black screens and answer long, monotonous questionnaires administered by doctors whose eyes were always just a little too wide, whose blinking was just a little too sparse. And then, on the 4th morning, they handed me my belongings in a clear plastic bag. No non-disclosure agreements, no threats, no shadowy men leaning over a desk telling me I'd been shot if I spoke. Just an envelope containing a small, amber pill bottle filled with unmarked white capsules, and a printed sheet of paper that read, "Take twice daily upon reoccurrence of visual distortion." They escorted me out a side door into a rainy alley in Queens. I stood in the drizzle, listening to the hum of the city, holding the plastic bag in one hand and the pill bottle in the other. I walked over to a storm drain at the corner of the street. I opened the bottle, turned it upside down, and watched all 60 white pills drop into the dark, rushing rainwater below. That was 3 weeks ago. I haven't seen the faces since. Not because I'm cured, and not because the pills would have saved me. I don't see them anymore because they learned how to hold the masks tighter. They patched the leak. They fixed the rendering error. They tightened the skin around their cheekbones, memorized the exact rhythm of a human blink, and went right back to work. Right back to sitting next to us on the subway. Right back to living in our apartments. They are everywhere. They have always been here. And for a few short days in August, a few of us caught them with their guard down. I'm writing this from an anonymous network at a public library in Brooklyn. I'm not looking for sympathy, and I'm not looking for medical advice. I'm working on a way to break the filter again, not with any pills or medications, with something else. A way to strip the latex off permanently so we could see what's actually sharing the city with us. If you were in that facility in New York, if you remembered the white room with the silent walls, or if you're still catching the lag in the reflection of the subway glass, find me. Leave a sign where the old R train drops off at 34th. We need to talk about what comes next.